And so let's record. Greetings,
Okay.
greetings, everybody. We're so happy to have Mr. Hank Balevic with us today. And Mr. Hank Balevic has written a book called Corporate Greed. He is an FBI director and professional, and we're so delighted that he's joined us. And the book says inaccurate background checks ruin and innocent lives while screening companies make millions. He's also written a book called Faulty
Background
checks. But we're delighted to have you with us, Hank. You got the floor. Tell us who you are and what your intentions are with your books, and we are here to listen.
Okay. Here we go. I'm a former FBI agent,
Okay, very good.
not a current one. So yeah, I spent 7 action-packed years with the Bureau. It was very, very good. And anyway, then I got into private security. But anyway, about the book, it's really an expose of faulty background checks that impact not only consumer applicants, but businesses as well. I consider it a scandal of epic proportions because it involves millions, not thousands, but millions of applicants being denied jobs and tenancy, a place to live. They're being denied a place to live based on a bogus background check. Over 100 background screening companies have been sued successfully, I might add, for violations of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. That's the federal law that regulates background screening. We got 100 of these companies that were successfully sued, not only by plaintiffs' attorneys, private attorneys, but also by the FTC. Unfortunately, the FTC, Federal Trade Commission, hasn't done much. In the 50 years they've been doing this, they came up with about 3 or 5 cases. Pretty poor. But anyway, I think what I'd like to do is just give you an example of a faulty background check. I do this in my seminars all the time. I usually have somebody from the audience play the role of the applicant. I play the role of the HR person or the president of the company. So the applicant comes in, I sit her down, or he, and say, unfortunately, Rosemarie, or whatever her name is, we cannot hire you because we make it a practice not to hire drug dealers. And according to your background check, you've not only been arrested, but you've been convicted of drug trafficking. What are you going to say, Rosemarie, to me, the president of the company? Usually what happens is they're stunned. They don't know what to say. So then I say to them, well, why don't you say, I've never been arrested or convicted of a serious crime? So I get them to ask me that. So now I, as the president, say, look, nice try, Rosemarie, but I've got it right here. I've got the report, the background report, and they don't make mistakes, that brand you a drug dealer. And not only were you arrested and convicted, but you spent 18 months in the state penitentiary. How about that? Again, they don't know what to say. They're sort of stunned. And I suggest to them, well, why don't you ask to see a copy of the report? And they say, oh, okay, let me see a copy of the report. Can I see a copy of the report? So then I say, as the president or the HR director, that's confidential information. You're not entitled to it. Company policy requires that we do not share this information with anybody. Now, that's the end of the confrontation or the interview. She leaves, never to be heard from again. What is she going to do? She's innocent. She never committed this crime. She's never been in prison. So a lot of people just go about their lives and say, well, that's it. I don't know. Some of them go get an attorney, talk to the attorney about what's happened. And here's what the attorney will say to them, if he's skilled in Fair Credit Reporting Act violations. I must say I don't want to slam too many attorneys, but according to what? Former Chief Justice Warren Burger, he said 65% of the attorneys are incompetent. And I must tell you, there are a lot of incompetent attorneys that have no clue what the Fair Credit Reporting Act is. Even labor attorneys, they don't know what's going on. But anyway, Rosemary or whatever her name is, she gets a good attorney, and he says, wow, you've got a good case. 3 violations of the Fair Credit Reporting Act have just occurred. Number 1, they denied you the take a look at or a copy of your background screening report. That's number 1. Number 2, they are required by federal law to give you what's called pre-adverse notice. And pre-adverse notice simply says, Rosemary, we're going to deny your application for either tenancy or employment, whatever it is, based on a background check. And in that connection, we are enclosing a copy of the background report and also a 4-page document entitled Your Rights Under the Fair Credit Reporting Act. That's what you're entitled to. So what we're going to do is we're going to file a lawsuit to compel them to give us all this information. It's called discovery. The last seminar I did, I said that there are millions of applicants that have been denied jobs in tenancy. There was one lady in the audience. She happened to be an attorney. This was a seminar for community association managers. So she said to me, I think you're exaggerating that a little bit. Millions of people? So I said to her, well, let me explain the anatomy of a class action lawsuit. Last year, 134 cases, class action lawsuits were filed, in addition to 5,280 regular lawsuits. That's in 1 year. So now what happens is with the class action lawsuits, it starts as one case. Now what happens is, under discovery, that allows the plaintiff's attorney to get documents in the defendant's file. What is he interested in? He wants to see if there are other applicants that have been denied jobs on the same basis as his client. So they file the action in federal court. They ask for a motion for discovery. Usually it's granted. So now they get the documents. And lo and behold, they find out that Mary Jane or Marie, whatever I said her name was, she's not the only one. There are 10, 20, maybe 50 more. So now what he does is goes back to the court, makes a motion for class action status. The federal judge approves it. Now he really gets to work. He starts finding out more and more. Now they're looking at more and more documents. Now it's not only 50, but 150, maybe 1,050, maybe 100,050, maybe 500,000 people. Or in one case I report 660,000 members. 660,000 applicants have been denied jobs based on violations of the Fair Credit Reporting Act, based on the documents he was able to get. A companion case had 440,000 members. That's 1,100,000 members of this these 2 class action lawsuits. But wait a minute, that's only 2 cases out of the 134 class action lawsuits that were filed. 1,100,000. And just to put it in perspective, over 1,100,000 people were denied jobs and applicants. That, folks, is more than the population of the state of Rhode Island, the state of Vermont, President Biden's hometown in Delaware. All of those states have less than 1,100,000 people. That's how huge this scandal is. Nobody ever heard about it. Nobody has taken the time. It's taken me 15 months, but that's why I've written the book. Well, I've written the book for other reasons as well, but to start off with, that's what I did. I wanted to expose what these background screening companies are doing. I know my time's running out. I just want to say some of the violations committed by the screening companies: failure to use legal authorization forms. They have what's called hold harmless agreements. In the authorization, they'll say that the applicant has to waive their right to bring an action against them if they make a mistake. So they can make all mistakes in the world, can't do anything about it. Failure to provide the applicants with a disclosure that the background screening background check will be conducted. Failure to assure accurate court results. That's in the first one. I was telling that the Rosemarie, the applicant, was denied a job based on a bogus background check. Why is that? How do they miss that? Because they're not checking the court records. They deal in stale databases. They deal with algorithms, bogus shortcuts. What else? They use automatic hiring programs that result in false labeling applicants as criminals. This gets to the laziness of companies. They got the HR people are swamped. They're doing medical records. They've got the hiring and firing. They got the 401ks to do. They're really overworked. So what they have done, some companies have done, they have an automatic or automated selection process. Unfortunately, the same companies that have this automated process use the major violations of the Fair Credit Reporting Act. So they produce a bogus background check. Now, guess what? We got the fox guarding the chicken coop because they've got a bogus background check and they're going to deny that person. They have those two roles. Outrageous. Fail to give applicants an opportunity to challenge the results of bogus criminal records. That gets to the fact that they don't have a copy. They're not given a copy of the report. And I mentioned the algorithms. But the other thing about the background checks, and this gets into the businesses, Luz, they're putting their faith and their trust in these bogus companies that are these illegally run background screening companies. So now they're forced to deny an innocent applicant a job. But on the flip side of that, if they're making a decision, or I should say, if they're making a judgment on an innocent person being a criminal, what about the criminals that are applying for jobs? Well, it logically follows that they're getting in there scot-free. They're not picking up the fact that they are, in fact, criminals. And in my book, I show a couple examples. For example, Home Depot, that's exactly what happened to them. They hired a guy that was given a clean bill of health. And what he did was he slashed his girlfriend, raped her, and wound up getting a 7-year prison sentence. And guess what? Home Depot had no clue because the background screening companies they used gave this guy a clean bill of health. The book is chock full of stuff like that. It's really a survival guide for both applicants and businesses. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
That's amazing, Hank. That's really amazing. I mean, how do you, what's the solution for correcting this? Is there one, or what's your evaluation? I mean, you could, so that doesn't sound like you can challenge the corporation stating and making these mandates. I mean, aside from you, I guess, hiring a lawyer, but it may be better. How do you do this on your own?
Yeah, that's the way it has to be, because there's no enforcement on the part of the federal government. The FTC is supposed to do that. I call it the flaccid FTC. They don't do a job at all.
Is that right?
50 years been going on. As a matter of fact, it's more egregious than that. They actually had background screening companies agree to what's called a stipulated agreement. They said in this document, about a 5-page document that the FTC had them sign, they agreed not to violate the Fair Credit Reporting Act and be good boys and girls. Not going to do it. So they get them to sign it. under penalty of perjury. They have to do certain things. They're got to be reviewed. And guess what?
Mhm.
They never followed up because I called up the FTC and I said, you know, this one company, I think it was Rent Grow or something. Yeah, Rent, I think. They signed a stipulated agreement. It was done on, I don't know what, August the 1st.
Mhm.
September the 15th, they got sued again for doing the same thing. And they continued to do it. And as a matter of fact, I just checked. Since the time that they signed that stipulated agreement not to ever, ever do that again, violate the law, they were sued another 60 times. There's
Wow.
your FTC.
So,
I called up the FTC
uh-huh.
and I talked to one of the lawyers over there, and I said, hey, I've been looking at these stipulated agreements. They're doing the same thing. What's going on here? You guys are dropping the ball.
Mhm.
You know what he said to me? He said, well, we're working something out with them privately. In other words, hide and go seek. You don't know that. Everybody says nowadays the buzzword is, what is it? Transparency.
Uh-huh, uh-huh.
The Federal Trade Commission is getting away with murder as far as I'm concerned.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, my job, I did the book. Now I'm trying to get people, and nobody in the media seems to be interested in it.
Mm-hmm.
I talked to a couple television stations. Yeah, Hank, boy, I'll tell you what, that sounds like a good, something we ought to cover. But you know what? We're running real thin.
Uh-huh.
We had 8, 10 reporters. Now we're down to 4, and one does the weather. We just don't have time for that.
Mm-hmm.
Don't have time for a huge consumer abuse story.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, that's what I do. I poke along, I make my calls, I do podcasts and seminars. At least, you know, the word is getting out a
Well,
little bit.
I appreciate your work and your heftiness. I think you're right. The public sentiment needs to fall toward, I mean, because we're going a long way, the wrong way. You know, I mean, when the criminals can get off on actually taking responsibility for their crimes, and people who are law abiding seems to have to pay for them. So we have to make some adjustments. And I appreciate the work that you're doing. And if there's something that we can help you do and publicize the full content of what's necessary, then I mean, it's okay because it's ignored, but it's not okay because it's ignored. You know,
I
so
got a quick question for Hank, if you still have just 30 seconds.
Bill,
Sure.
My son has just obtained a job with the federal government, and they went through a background check. Does and he was successful, I might say, but does the federal government typically do a better job than private industry?
Yes. When I was with the FBI, we did a lot of background checks, and I did them on cabinet level people, Secretary of Commerce, Secretary of this and that and the other thing. So when they do it, it's based on fingerprints. First of all, fingerprints.
Yeah, that was
Then if
first
they're going to get a security clearance, now they check the record at the courthouse. These background screening companies aren't getting accurate court records because they don't do it. They're too lazy. They're not going to go there. They want to make money. By the way, the number one company is called First Advantage. Last year, they did $1.1 billion in business.
Wow.
And they were also sued 310 times. But you know what? Even if they have to pay several $1 million in damages, they roll on. It's just a small cost of doing business. But to get your point, yeah, the federal government does a pretty fair job because they have access to good records, and they're going to do it properly.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, Hank. So what we'll do is we create an environment of discussions like this and dialogue that helps people come to understand that action needs to take place, and we need to transform our perspectives about things like that. So Hank, I want to commend you for being on with us, and thank you. You're quite, I mean, even deliberating quite all through the communications. You've been very strategic, and we thank you for being here. So let us talk offline soon to come up with some strategies to create an environment that's more relevant like this. you know, so,
Okay, well, thank you very much. I appreciate the opportunity to be
And
on.
I appreciate your perseverance of with the technology,
right,
sticking it out and doing this. So this is awesome.
right, right.
Yeah, so let's continue the dialogue, and I want to get the Bill on next.